The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for March 14th through the 18th of 2022. Okay, we'll start off with the NZD-USD pair. This is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this move up right here, starting from this range right here, was solely based on momentum, in the long term I am short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, on the daily chart, since there was a weak long trade that formed and a strong short trade that formed, in the short term I am also short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So at the end of last year, at this point right here, there was a strong short trade that formed, and then a weak long trade formed right here. And so at this point, the bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. And at the current moment, I'm waiting for another weekly long trade to form so I could again gauge the strength of it against the last weekly short trade right here to derive a new weekly biases target, which will be at the pivot low of that hypothetical long trade. So at the current moment, although the weekly bias is still short, there is no obvious target. Okay, however, if you recall, I was mentioning price was likely to reach at least this pivot high right here. For on the daily chart, the last short trade that formed was at this level with the stop loss at this height. And this week, we actually got that pullback to that stop loss level. And simultaneously, there was another daily short trade that formed. And so on Thursday, I took a short entry at this 0.6850 levels right here, with the stop loss at this pivot high right here. And its main target in this case, roughly at a 4-hour trend line that runs around these levels right here, and extension targets below. So let me just go ahead and explain this setup to you. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, that daily short trade formed right here, and the last daily long trade was right here. So in other words, the daily bias is short and price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. Now moreover, in this case, the main target will be a 4-hour trend line that runs roughly at these levels right here. So I'll be taking out the majority of the position if price reaches these levels right here. Now the reason why on this trade, the main target is at this level, not the obvious stop loss level of the daily long trade, is simply due to the fact that this daily short trade is only slightly stronger than this daily long trade. And moreover, on the lower time frames, I'm currently not getting any overwhelming confirmation of this short bias. Now that said, there was slight confirmation of this short bias on the 5-minute chart, roughly in these areas. So let me go ahead and explain that to you real quick. Let's go over to the 5-minute chart. Okay, so on this 5-minute chart, as price pulled back close to that daily stop loss level, there was confirmation of short-term strong short strength, which led me to enter that short entry. Now that confirmation came from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, there was a breakout, an immediate break back in. Now this signals normal long strength. However, as you can see, price came right back down to stop out that pivot low where that long strength was created, thus creating strong short strength. Alright, so roughly at this 0.6850 levels right here, I took a short entry with a stop loss at 69.24 above at the pivot high of the daily short trade that I showed you earlier. And then moreover, even as price pulled back all throughout these levels, there were no signs of short-term long strength that can override that short-term short confirmation. So I maintained that short position. And at this point, there are still no confirmations of any long strength. So I'm maintaining that short entry. Okay, and lastly, let me just show you that 4-hour trend line I was talking about. which is the main target for this daily short bias. So let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so again, I took that short entry at 0.6450 levels, roughly around here, with a stop loss at this pivot high right here, and its main target at this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, if price could reach this trend line level right here, I'll take out 80% of that short position, and then moreover see if we could get any further right down to the daily bias's main target right down at these levels right here. Alright, however, like I mentioned earlier, this daily short trade is only slightly stronger than that long trade, so I am keeping an eye on any short-term strong long strength to kick in which case it does, I will abort this short position immediately. Okay, and I'll keep you guys updated on how I manage this trade on the midweek analysis and on the communities tab. Okay, so let's go on to the Euro Yen. Okay, this is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since the last weekly long trade, that form was right here, and last year at this point right here, it was compact short price action that form, which shows strong short strength. So in the long term, I am short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, on the 1 hour chart, since there was a price pattern that formed in this area, which will dictate the future direction of this pair in the short term, but that price pattern is not confirmed yet. In the short term, I am neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, we'll stay on this weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So again, the weekly bias on this weekly chart is short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And so at the end of last year, price pulled all the way back to these levels. And although price was going up, there were no confirmation of strength on the lower time frames. So that was a great pullback short entry with the stop loss at this pivot high right here. And then moreover, as price fell down to these levels, price was having a hard time getting through a monthly gap level that runs right through these levels. And so we got another pullback to that stop loss level. However, this long move again was not confirmed on the lower time frames. And so again, as price pulled back close to that stop loss level, I took multiple short entries all in these levels with a stop loss at this pivot high right here and its main target being right down here. So let me go ahead and explain how I'm managing that short trade I'm still in. So let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, if you recall, that last short entry I took was at 131.50, roughly at these levels, with a stop loss at 132.67 above. And then as price fell all the way down to these levels, if you recall, I was mentioning there were no signs of strong long strength, so I kept the entire position in. And then moreover, as price pulled back in these areas, there are still no signs of strong long strength on the lower time frames. So at the current moment, I have 100% of that short position still in. However, if there is any short-term long strength kicking back in, I am willing to take out 80% of this short position. And I'll keep you guys updated with that. Now moreover, since the weekly bias is still short, any further pullbacks to this 131.50 levels and beyond, I'm still willing to take more short entries at this point. Again, with the same stop loss at 132.67 above. Now, in terms of whether or not we'll get a further pullback for further short entries, depends on this 1 hour fake double top that formed right here. Now, in this case, if price could reach its target height level before reaching a second top stop loss level right here, that will confirm strong short strength. And in this case, it is likely we will not get any further pullbacks for further short entries. So this week, I'll be watching if price does fall to this target height level before reaching the stop loss level right here to confirm that situation. Okay, and I'll keep you guys updated with the trade management of this short entry also. Alright, so let's go on to the pound dollar. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of lower confirmations and weekly biases, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can learn how to trade price action. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line right here just became legitimate with this 3 touches at 1, 2, and 3 right here, and since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels, in the long term I'm long biased, right back up to this horizontal trend line. However, on the weekly chart, since there was a fake double top that formed right here, which actually went its target height level this week at these levels right here, showing strong weekly short strength. In the medium term, I'm short biased, right back down to this trend line right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So there was a strong short trade that formed right here. And 2 weeks later, there was a week-long trade that formed right here. So the weekly bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. And then another 3 weeks later, there was a strong long trade that formed right here. So at this point, the bias became long, which was stronger than this last weekly short trade. And so at this point, the bias became long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And immediately price rose all the way up to these levels just short of that main target, or another weak short trade formed right here. And so at this point, the bias remained long. However, the new target became this pivot high right here. And so if you recall, I was waiting for a pullback to the 13300 levels for a long entry. However, due to the possibility that this weekly long bias hit its main target at these levels right here, I was mentioning I needed confirmation of short-term long strength to enter this long entry. However, that long strength never formed, so I did not take this entry long. Now simultaneously, that also confirmed that this weekly long bias did in fact hit its main target at this point right here through a monthly trend line that just became legitimate. And so the weekly bias at this point became short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high, and that main target was hit this week. And so at this point, I'll be waiting for another weekly or daily bias to form by measuring the strength differential between the two, and then decide a weekly or daily bias, whether long or short. Okay, moreover, there was a weekly fake double top that formed that definitely shows some strong weekly short strength. So let me go ahead and explain that to you. Let me just get rid of these and zoom out. Alright, so on this weekly chart, roughly about a year ago, there was a fake double top that formed. And this week, that target height level was reached at this level right here before reaching the stop loss level right here. Now this shows that on the weekly chart, there is strong short strength confirmed at this point. So in terms of weekly and daily biases, I would prefer a short bias to form, so I could trade along this strong short strength on this weekly chart. Now I'll be looking for these short entries all the way down to these levels right here where a strong monthly trend line exists. So let me go ahead and show you that. Let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that trend line level is from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so again, since there was weekly strong short strength confirmed by this fake double top at this point, I much rather take short entries through weekly and daily biases, at least down to these levels right here. Okay, so just remember there's strong short strength on a weekly time frame at this point, at least down to these levels. Okay, so let's go on to the Euro-USD pair. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this price action right here is very strong short and this move still having a ways to go, in the long term I'm short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. However, because of a breakout of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, and since monthly price still has not broke back into this trend line, in the medium term I'm still long biased, right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So the last long trade that formed was right here, and then at this point right here, there was a short trade that was stronger than this long trade, so the bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. So if you recall last year, I took two short entries, one at 122.50 at the 121.30 levels, with both stop losses at this pivot high and its main target at this pivot low. And then roughly in these areas right here, I took out 80% of that short position. However, as price pulled back in each one of these areas, there were consistently no signs of short-term long strength, and so I kept 20% of that short position in. However, like I was mentioning, taking out another 10% of that short position at the 1.0900 levels, roughly around here, where monthly trend lines retest existed, and that target was hit last week right here. And so I took out another 10% of that short position that I entered last year from these levels right here. Now, in terms of weekly and daily biases, I'm still waiting for a short trade to form and a long trade to form so I could gauge a daily or weekly bias. However, they did not form at the current moment. However, there is a key level on the monthly chart that price is testing at this point right here. And moreover, there is some advice I want to give to you guys. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so the first thing I'll be looking at is that trend line I mentioned on the overview from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, first of all, I'll be watching if this monthly candle can close under this trend line. And if it closes under this trend line this month, that will apply some long-term short strength. And if it doesn't, I would apply some long-term long strength. Okay, and moreover, there is another trend line that I'm watching, and that's from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, using lower confirmation tactics can give you a general idea of the long-term direction of price. Now, first of all, if price closes past this trend line on the bottom right here and immediately breaks back in, now by immediate, I mean the close of the breakout candle and the open of the break-in candle is at the same level, well, that would apply long-term long strength. And on the other hand, if there's a breakout of it and no immediate break back in, well, that would apply slight long-term short strength. Okay, so that is what I'm watching on the monthly chart in the coming months. Now, moreover, I want to discuss a common mistake people make in terms of trend lines. Let me just get rid of these. Okay, so a common mistake that people would draw for this confirmation of long-term short or long strength is that they will draw the trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, from a price action point of view, this trend line is not legitimate to begin with in terms of future strength confirmation. Now, that's simply due to the pivots of the attachment points being too far apart. Alright, so just keep in mind the breakout trend line you want to be looking for is from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so we'll just see what happens on this pair in the coming months. Okay, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week. And thanks for watching. Okay, bye.